So more of like how do we relate point of view composition with spatial composition? So this is a just a top-down blueprint of a hypothetical level. So let's go ahead and map out sort of all the possible paths that the player could take through it. So I'm imagining that maybe this is some sort of I don't know, building complex, apartment complex, I don't know, office building, that sort of thing. And it's gated off with the walls here. The player enters from the top right here. And, as they come to intersections, there's points on this map, specific places on here that are what you probably call decision points. So it's places where you decide to go one way or another. So let's go ahead and sort of fill those in. So these places right here, as you come to them, you decide, are you going to be going down, or are you going to go this way? And as you come down here, you decide to go further into the sort of this courtyard area, or you come into this this little dead end right here. I'm sort of borrowing an idea that comes from architecture. And this, in architecture, in wayfinding design, is called a node network. These are nodes, decision points within a layout. And a lot of times in architecture design, they use node networks to sort of map out where are the high traffic areas, where do I need to put my messaging, like my signs that tell me to get from one department to another in a complex building. Sort of the more that paths of the people that go through a building cross, the more sort of you find places that are more important than others for essentially messaging to the player or messaging to your audience. So essentially, I use that idea in order to determine where I want my static, my image compositions to be from. And I kind of look at this and, I never do this. I never do this I guess actually when I'm creating production levels. This is more of a something that's in my head. So I don't expect you to, in the future, I guess, draw blueprints of your levels and do this. But to think of this, I want to get across this idea, and so that when as you're creating your levels, you're thinking about where can I guarantee that the player is going to be walking through. Where do I want their attention directed? And so coming into this space, I'm just going to go ahead and mark what I feel like are essentially the most important views in this particular space right here. So these are probably, and I think that this is a very subjective thing. So in your level, or if this was your level, you might choose other points. But I think, of course, to me, as soon as you enter in the space, this is probably the most important one. We need to really sort of present this building as a structure that needs to be explored. So, this image right here is probably this static composition from this arrow right here is probably the most important. So as I sort of traverse through here, I think that this sort of main space here in the middle is very important for understanding sort of how the spaces flow into one another. So a lot of the compositions that sort of present this space and all these like doorways and stuff like that are very important. So as you sort of enter in from sort of an interior space, a lot of interior spaces don't have a lot of visibility. So you'll find that essentially your most important compositions are sort of coming out from tight spaces. Doorways are a great place to start thinking about sort of point of view compositions. So as you can see right here, this is probably a really important one because this place basically comes out from either one of these doorways right here and ends you up right here. So you're looking out into the courtyard. This image, this sort of I guess as you continue through here, you're very likely to sort of come out this doorway, and then we want to present this corner building right here in such a way that allows you to sort of understand what the gameplay is there. So these are sort of the major compositional points. And then, you could go through and start, making sort of more sort of minor compositional points and stuff like that. So essentially, a lot of times I will actually build my level by looking through these points, very much like we did for our assignment last week, where we sort of built a scene from the perspective of the player spawning. This is sort of it's a very push and pull sort of thing, because see, as you have this single space of this sort of courtyard right here, and obviously we're going to be looking at the same space from a number of different angles, and the question is, how do you create a single space that makes for a great composition from each of those angles? So there's going to be some sort of compromise between those two things, and it's kind of like putting a puzzle together, and it's like, a lot of I personally, I really enjoy that sort of process of sort of like, I'll put a couple of different cameras in the world, make sure that I've got a good view from one to another. So the question is like, okay, what is obviously each of these points represents individual image composition, but the overall flow of this level is the spatial composition. The idea of like, we have this sort of courtyard area, and we have these this building right here. How does the building flow together? How does this building flow together? So that's basically what we're talking about today. And as you can see from this demonstration right here, composition of the space very much dictates where the composition of the sort of the image points are going to be, the point of view points. And the point of view points very much sort of are used to communicate to the player the spatial composition. So they kind of really have a big sort of back and forth. So goals of spatial composition are in a lot of ways similar to point of view or image composition. One, they communicate narrative or gameplay message. So the composition of the space, it dictates sort of the tone and how sort of that connects to narrative beats. The composition of the space also dictates sort of player goals and directives. We put a space together in such a way that we present goals, or we lead you to places where we're going to have a static image composition and to present goals for you and directives. And we'll get into this in just a little bit. And then the third thing is communicating sort of world building. So spatial composition, especially spatial hierarchy and organization, tells us a lot about sort of the intent of any particular space, who built it in the fiction that we're creating, what was its purpose, how do each of the spaces sort of relate. So second goal of spatial composition would be artistic expression. Just like when you are placing or you're painting, you're putting together your composition for a photograph, a lot of it is very much sort of an artistic directive, very much like when you were doing your assignment last week, you're sort of just I guess playing with space and trying to see what feels good, what feels fun, what excites you, what do you find interesting. Third goal of spatial composition is to enable basically good point of view composition at nodes, because we want to have sort of this, we want the players to sort of feel as if they're moving through this space, that they're constantly getting these really good static compositions, and it really makes our levels feel alive. That makes it feel aesthetically pleasing. And then lastly, supporting player mental mapping. Essentially, how does the player sort of begin to understand where they are in the space and how it relates to other spaces, how it relates to their goals. And that's something we're going to really get into next lecture.